Hello, New Paltz. Welcome to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'm here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. talking movies, new reviews, recommendations, lists. I just love movies, and that's what I do here. On today's show, my final of the semester, I'm going to be reviewing new movies Michael and Over Your Dead Body, doing a 3-movie highlight on 3 past music biopics, and closing out the show with my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. I'll be right back, but first here's some movie music, starting with Run for the Podium by Hans Zimmer from the F1 the Movie score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Kicking off the show today, we have the new music biopic that is making a ton of money at the box office, Michael. Directed by Antoine Fuqua, the story of the famous musician Michael Jackson, known as the King of Pop. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the music biopic genre. We'll talk about a few other ones in a bit. I'm not super into music, and some of the musicians that have gotten prominent biopics made of them in recent years, as stories of these people that I've heard of and am aware of their fame and impact, but not knowing much of their stories or who they are beyond a few of their songs maybe. I do find a few of them somewhat interesting as these true stories, but I don't find any I've seen super compelling, but some have been done to different degrees of success. You have one for Michael Jackson now, starring Michael's nephew Jafar Jackson, and with Antoine Fuqua directing. While it has well-created Michael Jackson musical sequences and style, it is one of the more lackluster stories for a musical biopic with poor characters and pacing. So with this one, let's start with the lead performance from Jafar Jackson. A lot of times with these musical biopics, the best part of the movie is the lead performance for the main person being depicted. Even some of the lesser ones over the years have had some really impressive lead performances that make you feel the energy of these people and their impact, what they brought to their music and their performances. And for this movie, it's depicting one of the most iconic pop stars of all time with Michael Jackson, with his music and how many songs that even someone like me that's not particularly a fan of Michael Jackson, even I can name a bunch of his songs and identify them right away. I've heard them in different places in my life with just exposure and other movies and parties or whatever. You know who Michael Jackson is. Most songs of this movie that when they come up and have a big scene with them featured, I recognize them right away. And not just with the music itself and how iconic his songs are, but the look and stage presence he had, his style in dancing and the imagery of his music videos. There's so much identifiable with Michael Jackson with his music and his performances that people love and would want from a movie depicting his story, and that's certainly the case for other musicians that have gotten biopics made of them, and will be true of future ones that get made, but there is another level of fame and star power that Michael Jackson has that does become very important to nail when you're doing a depiction of his life, and I would say that this movie accomplished that. And a big part of this is the lead performance from Jafar Jackson. He really brings the energy you would associate with Michael Jackson, with his show power and smoothness, his high energy in these performances, the way he moves with these dance moves and the choreography there. It's such a unique way he incorporated his great voice and flow of these songs with his dance moves and how he moved around the stage. It could not have been an easy thing to pull off and recreate, but Jafar got it down. Everything from the smoothness and his facial expressions. When I was watching these musical sequences, it was so convincing. With the musical sequences, I imagine those will be a big expectation for those looking forward to this movie, and fans of Michael Jackson wanting that experience. They got those down. A bunch of his most famous songs get their moment here. A big portion of this story is the creation of his first solo album with a bunch of hits on it, so you get them featured in the background, some you see the recording of, seeing the inspiration and creative process of them, and of course live performances of them with the dancing and live energy. The sets of these stages and arenas with the lighting, the wardrobe and costume design, of course with Jafar Jackson's performance. You watch these sequences and the vibe of Michael Jackson and the style of his live shows comes through. I also did enjoy a few of the recording and developing sequences where he's making the songs, and you get some of the classic elements of the music biopic, like seeing these iconic songs be made and be heard for the first time. Some of these moments capture that magic as well. And with the performances, you of course get some of Michael's solo performances, but also the Jackson 5 and his brothers have some performances as well, with some other famous songs. With the music and the creation of these performances, having the energy and star power of Michael Jackson and his music, this movie does deliver a lot of that quite successfully. Now, that musical experience, the movie does nail, but when it comes to the story being told here of Michael Jackson and his life and his career, there are a lot of problems. The pacing and flow of this story is very odd. As it goes through his life and his career, his early shows and him being discovered, it takes you through a bunch of these important points of his story really quickly with very little depth, and I think that becomes a problem with some other music biopics as well. going through these points that are important and that you would expect and need for this story, but not going deeper with the characters and really feeling the emotions of each scene and this overall story. I think some of the better music biopics really get into the characters and their complexity with their relationships and how their career and personality affects their story beyond the music, and Michael does not do this very well, unfortunately. There's a number of characters in this story that you get on the surface what their significance to Michael was, and can imagine what impact they had on his life. There's this family dynamic and how Michael's start to his musical career started with his childhood and performing in the family band with his brothers and his father managing them. And it goes a little bit into the relationship with his mother, but in the times of the movie when it's not about the performances, when it's depicting this more personal side to this man and these people in his life, there's not enough in these scenes to make you feel their impact to him enough to really get invested in this as a story. You get the gist, he was close with his mother, there's a few moments with his brothers, but it's pretty shallow and so many characters here don't really have a strong presence as key people in Michael's life. They feel just there enough to keep the story moving without making you feel the impact on Michael as a person. And even Michael himself and him as a character in this movie, he does get some depth with him as a person, of this idea of him trying to be his own man, with his own dreams and goals, but even that becomes very repetitive. I would say the most interesting and fleshed out relationship here is Coleman Domingo as his father, Joseph Jackson. Domingo is really strong here, and this character is so frustrating as this guy that preaches all this stuff about his kids needing to work hard to have a good life, but he sees them so much as his performers, and just in their ability to make music, more like his clients than his sons a lot of the time. There's these ideas of Michael's reaction to this as he rises in fame and how that relationship develops over his career. That dynamic had a little more to it to get invested in, but ultimately, the musical sequences and the personal moments in his life are very poorly balanced. The story introduces characters and story elements without going deeper with them, and where it ends is extremely awkward and ends the story at a very weird point, where the sort of final moment and outcome has very little punch to it. This is overall a very strange movie. It gets the music and showmanship of Michael Jackson down with the creation of these musical sequences and Jafar Jackson's performance. I think Michael Jackson fans will enjoy a lot of the sequences here, but as a story, it does a very poor job building meaningful characters and relationships to make the story of Michael Jackson have emotion and engagement. If you're a fan of Michael Jackson, I would see this, but it really falls short as a meaningful story with characters and relationships to really get invested in. I found this movie decently entertaining, but the story is poorly told. I give Michael a 60 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Beat It by Michael Jackson from the Michael soundtrack. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, I'm going to do a 3-movie highlight on some past music biopics I watched recently. 2 of these I had seen before, but it's been a few years, and one was a first-time watch for me. Let's get right into this. I will spoil some things here and there. Let's start with the one I watched for the first time recently, and that is 2005's Walk the Line. Directed by James Mangold, a chronicle of country music legend Johnny Cash's life, from his early days on an Arkansas cotton farm to his rise to fame with Sun Records in Memphis. This was one that's been on my watch list for a while. I'm not a Johnny Cash fan, just not into his kind of music, but I love James Mangold's movies, and with these biopics, if you tell a story with compelling characters and drama, I can be interested in seeing a true story I didn't know the details of. For all these movies, I at least somewhat heard of the band or musician being covered, but I didn't know much of any of the specifics of their life and career, and I find the more interesting ones to be the ones that don't just fly through their careers without going deeper and making you really care about the characters and human story. That was the major drawback for Michael for me. It had the flashiness and style without telling its story very well. And for Walk the Line, this one does a good job at balancing the rise of Johnny Cash's career and his fame with exploring the person and the struggles in his personal life. You certainly have some of the cliche elements of the musical biopic, the rise to fame and their first discovery, and then playing their first concert, but a lot of these scenes in this movie are really powerful even while being somewhat predictable. I think of the scene when Johnny and his band are playing to the guy at the record label to audition, and they're playing these hymns that they think can sell, but he's not feeling it and pushes him to play what he's really passionate about and what is special to him, and he plays the song he wrote that gets him noticed. It's a beautifully subtle scene that shows the power of believing in yourself and taking risks. The performance from Dallas Roberts is so effective in that scene. He's not in a ton of the movie, but he really shines there. And a bunch of other moments like that are done really well. The scene where Johnny plays in Folsom Prison, and overall the performance scenes and capturing what each performance means to the character at this point in his life made each one not just well directed and acted, and if you enjoy Johnny Cash's music, there is plenty, but they help tell the story as well in an engaging way. And with the performances, Joaquin Phoenix is tremendous here as Johnny Cash. He's such an amazing actor. The movie goes into Johnny's childhood and family life and how that affected him as an adult, dealing with depression and addiction and self-hatred. There's scenes where he's so broken and takes it out on the relationships in his life. There's Reese Witherspoon as June Carter here that is another great performance. She's fun and energetic, but she's an important part of Johnny's story and the drama in that relationship, but also how important they were to each other. This movie gets heavy with the drama and the tension with the characters, also with Robert Patrick as his cruel father. It hits on these moments of the lows of Johnny's life that have some hard-hitting and brutal scenes, but there is also some hope and more uplifting moments. This movie is tough to watch at points, but it's really well done and another strong James Mangold movie I've seen. He's one of my favorite directors. This isn't the most rewatchable movie or one I have a strong interest in the subject matter of, but the performances and storytelling are excellent. This is one of the best music biopics I've seen. The next one we're going to talk about is one I find more rewatchable and maybe has more entertainment than Walk the Line, but is also definitely not as good in my opinion. That is 2018's Bohemian Rhapsody. Directed by Bryan Singer, with his impeccable vocal abilities, Freddie Mercury and his rock band Queen achieve superstardom. However, amidst his skyrocketing success, he grapples with his ego, sexuality, and a fatal illness. I saw this movie for the first time a few years ago, around when it came out, a little after its theatrical run. And of the music biopics I've seen, and of the ones we're talking about today, Queen and Freddie Mercury were the subjects I recognized the least. Once I heard a few of the songs, like We Will Rock You and Another One Bites the Dust, I recognized those, and I guess I just never knew what the name of the band was. But even just the iconic look of Freddie Mercury and his energy, I was really not too familiar with this band like I can immediately identify someone like Michael Jackson or Elvis. So I went into this movie pretty fresh, barely having heard of the band, and this one is an overall okay movie with some great elements to it. The big problem for this movie for me is that it moves way too fast, especially in the first hour. You get into the story and meeting Freddie Mercury, and you get a little bit of the relationship with his family, and then he meets the band, and some time goes by, and you get a little bit of the dynamic there. He meets Mary, played by Lucy Boynton, and get a little bit of that relationship, and there's their first album, and then their first tour, them signing the record deals. It flies through all this so quickly that it's hard to really get invested, and many of the characters are quite bland. I get these are all important events in the story of Queen, but it's a crazy speed it goes through all of them without allowing these quieter moments with the characters enough time to breathe before moving on. So the relationship with Mary and with the band just isn't there for a while. And through all this, the movie is still entertaining. You get a good amount of Queen music and some performances. Seeing them make the first few albums and the creative techniques there and some of the battles with the record company they had to fight were pretty interesting. And I would say this movie is more entertaining than something like Walk the Line with this energy. But it does sacrifice some character depth, and the points where Freddie is going through these struggles and these reckless habits, they don't feel as built up with the conflict with the band. I will say things really improve later in the movie as he works through some of his struggles, realizing who in his life really cares about him and who just wants to use him, and him reconnecting with the band and wanting to make the most of his life, as he knows he has AIDS and has a limited time left to live. The emotions and characters become way more powerful. The final Live Aid performance is spectacular and makes you feel the impact of Freddie Mercury making the most of his life, playing music with his friends for the world and for a good cause, trying to make people happy and put on a show. The relationship with Mary and their close bond becomes more developed as well. And Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury is tremendous and is so energetic and shows all the dimensions of this character really well when things get more emotional. This is one that starts off pretty weak, but it improves later and ends really strongly. Not a great movie, but it has a lot of good moments. The third and final music biopic we're going to talk about is 2019's Rocketman. Directed by Dexter Fletcher, the musical fantasy about Elton John's breakthrough years, from his time as a prodigy at the Royal Academy of Music through his influential and enduring musical partnership with Bernie Taupin. I think this is my favorite of these movies. This one, like Bohemian Rhapsody, is very entertaining at points. Elton John is another very high-energy musician in his songs and performances and style, and with this movie you even get some more flat-out musical sequences with characters breaking out in song and dance, even outside of the concert performance scenes. This does add a unique element that seems fitting for Elton John in telling his story. Straight-up musical sequences aren't something I enjoy too much. There's not a ton of them here, but I can't say they were my favorite thing when they did come up. I think they were well done. That's really a preference thing for me. With the concert sequences though, and Elton John actually playing music in the real world of the movie, they were some of the most energetic and impressive of all these movies for me. The classic music biopic elements done in this movie I think are some of the best as well, with the first performance and people being amazed at his music and showmanship, playing the piano with his style, and also the element of Elton and his friend Bernie, played by Jamie Bell, and seeing their rise to success as friends and also the tension that grows there. The movie leaning into that friendship so much was a strong emotional core, as Elton goes further into depression and addiction, and how he feels abandoned and unloved. The drama of this movie is really hard-hitting because you really care about Elton's happiness and this friendship, and the way this drama is depicted with some of these musical sequences and these sort of dreams and fantastical elements also works really well and have some striking visuals and creativity in them that makes you feel the emotions of each of them and uses the song really well to match it. And Taron Egerton here is incredible as Elton John in bringing the showmanship and energy. He's likable and ambitious, and when he gets into this depression and these sadder points in the story, the anguish and emotion he shows is brutal. This movie balances the liveliness of Elton John with the darker elements of his story. The direction and performances are excellent. I had seen this movie a few years ago, and rewatching it a few days ago, I forgot how good it was. If I were to give a quick ranking of these three movies, and throwing Michael in there as well, I'd go Michael in last, then Bohemian Rhapsody, then Walk the Line, and then Rocketman at first. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with I'm Still Standing by Elton John from the Rocketman soundtrack. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, let's talk about Over Your Dead Body. Directed by Jorma Taccone, a dysfunctional married couple, played by Jason Segel and Samara Weaving, retreats to a secluded cabin to repair their relationship, but each secretly plots to murder the other. This looked to be a dark comedy of sorts that I didn't know too much about besides that general description there, and I think that is a good way to watch this movie. This is a really enjoyable movie if you're in the mood for a genre blender. One of the genres this movie is tackling is of course this sort of messed up crime plot of a husband and wife trying to kill each other and coming up with these separate plans that end up colliding at this cabin. That's a great selling point for this movie that does a good job at selling the dark comedy and balance of tone this movie succeeds at. It's of course a horrible idea of this couple wanting to kill each other and both being willing to go through with it, but the idea of them both planning to do it at the same time on the same trip and both having their plans in the works makes it wild and funny as well. And that's where it brings in the comedy genre really effectively with this concept. The absurdity that comes with both their plans and them both being very reckless and impulsive in their ideas, trying to mastermind these plans and seeing how it goes very wrong for both of them. There's some shocking moments with the violence and where these plans escalate to that can be uncomfortable for sure, but also have a lot of entertainment. It really never reaches a point where it's too unpleasant or too silly. It really balances it so well, and there will be these twists in the story and shifts that start to get so nasty. There's some tense moments, some brutal fights and gore, but the comedic writing and performances here bring the humor as well. And that main duo of Jason Segel and Samara Weaving are excellent here. The dialogue and performance with the two of them at the beginning, where they're arguing and are being so nasty to each other, are surprisingly so much fun. The way they're acting so petty and mean to each other and putting each other down, the things they're saying to each other, it really shouldn't be fun, but the line deliveries and the wild energy of these performances makes it funny without taking away the discomfort of it. These exchanges are still really messed up, but having that humor in there and finding these characters funny as they're saying all this adds so much enjoyment as well. It's a strange mix that I was amazed at how well it was executed by everyone involved. And with still feeling that discomfort with their conflict, the movie actually has some sweeter moments in the story it ends up at that seem very unlikely at the start, but once you reach them, it's really powerful at progressing the characters and this marriage drama in a meaningful way. This still would have been fun with all the craziness of the crime and some of the wild twists in this story, but you get to the end and actually have a deeper ending in moments. It was something I didn't expect going into this, or even for much of the movie, but you end up seeing where it's going, and where it ends up works really naturally into the story as well. My one complaint with this movie is there's some other characters in here that I found a little more annoying with the humor at points. Some jokes and line deliveries that didn't really land, and some character quirks I didn't find that funny. But overall, this is a very violent and dark movie that people who don't do gore and other nastier areas this story goes would probably want to skip this. but if you want some dark comedy and brutal moments, a brilliant duo of lead performances, and a story that surprises with its twists and where the characters go, I would highly recommend this movie. Such a well done genre blender. I give Over Your Dead Body an 83 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Spider Society by Daniel Pemberton from the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Closing out the show today, I'm going to give you my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. Every week, I like to take 3 movies I like to recommend and talk about them a little bit here. My first throwback recommendation for this week is 1995's The American President. Directed by Rob Reiner, widowed U.S. President Andrew Shepard, played by Michael Douglas, falls for a lobbyist, played by Annette Bening, while facing a tough re-election battle. This is one of Rob Reiner's lesser-known movies. I don't hear about it too much. His filmography is stacked, though, so it makes sense for some really good movies to get overlooked as well. This is a really nice romantic drama with that element of Michael Douglas as the president and how he navigates this relationship with being one of the most prominent public figures in the world. He's the leader of the country, but he's also a human and has wants in life and personal parts of his life that he tries to maintain with his very demanding job. Everyone wants something from him that pulls him in all these directions. It balances being this romance with the drama and tension there really well. Michael Douglas as the president is very down-to-earth and likable. He brings the energy so well of being this pretty normal guy that refuses to give in to the idea that he can't find happiness with someone just because he's the president. Annette Bening is really charming here as well, and the relationship feels authentic. There's definitely a cheesiness here, but it also makes the characters feel real so you can get invested with the relationship in the midst of this very high-stress political battle. The supporting cast is also great here with Martin Sheen, Michael J. Fox, and more. This is a really nice movie that if you want to check something else out in Rob Reiner's filmography, you like these actors, there's a lot to enjoy here. My second throwback recommendation for this week is 1995's Casino. Directed by Martin Scorsese, in Las Vegas, 2 best friends, a casino executive and a mafia enforcer, compete for a gambling empire and a fast-living, fast-loving socialite. This isn't one of Scorsese's more iconic or top-tier crime epics, but even being not the best of Scorsese's filmography, it's still really good and worth watching for these performances, and if you like something like Goodfellas, where you experience this long and brutal story. Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Sharon Stone are a tremendous cast here as these characters that get deeper into this crime world of this mob-connected casino empire and all the terrible stuff that goes down there. The intensity and the way Scorsese builds this crime world where there's threats everywhere, everyone is trying to get ahead and will do horrible things in order to keep their power in this world. The sets of these casinos and these crime hangouts have that mix of the glamour and excitement this world seems to have, and then also being grimy and nasty with all the murder and corruption involved. Even as not being one of my favorite of these kinds of crime movies, it's still Scorsese directing with this strong cast, so it's still really good. If you're a fan of Scorsese and haven't watched Casino yet, I would check it out. My third throwback recommendation for this week is 1993's A Bronx Tale. Directed by Robert De Niro, an intense drama about a boy torn between his tough, hard-working father and a violent yet charismatic crime boss. This is another sort of crime movie with a great Robert De Niro performance, but it's a very different kind of story from something like Casino that I wanted to recommend here as well. This is more of a coming-of-age movie with this young man being raised by his working-class father and being brought in by a local crime boss that becomes another influence on him, and seeing how he navigates growing up with these different lessons from different father figures in his life, how the people he hangs out with feel about different things going on in his life that he feels differently about, and the difficulties of growing up in this world where you have so many different opinions and influences around you while you're trying to figure out who you are. This movie doesn't lean so much into the crime as much as it does this boy growing up, and what that role plays in his upbringing and the complex nature of these dynamics. It's a heavy movie, but there's sweeter and more uplifting moments as well. It's a really well-told story that has a lot of emotion, and the cast and Robert De Niro directing this one brings it to life with the intensity and emotions needed for the story. Check this one out if you want something different from the crime genre that explores these characters really well. So this week, if you want a nice romance drama with this president story, watch The American President. If you want an intense Martin Scorsese crime epic, watch Casino. And if you want a complex drama that works in the crime genre with a coming-of-age story, watch A Bronx Tale. I'll be right back to close out the show, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Am I Not Merciful by Hans Zimmer, Gavin Greenaway, and the Lyndhurst Orchestra from the Gladiator score. That's going to be it for me this week and this semester on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I will be continuing the show only on my YouTube over the summer. I'll be back on WFNP Rosendale in the fall, but we're keeping things going over the summer with a lot of exciting new releases. I have some plans I'm really excited about. Thanks so much for listening this semester. I'll be taking next week off, but I'll be back the week after to kick off the summer with a review of Mortal Kombat 2 and some more movie talk. Be sure to follow my YouTube for past and upcoming episodes, as well as my Instagram. Both of those are Not Quite My Tempo with Chris, and I'll be back on YouTube in a couple weeks to start this summer of movies.